Welcome to the John Cady podcast. I'm John Cady, U.S. Navy retired, former minister. Since I began my podcasts earlier this year, I've touched on several episodes, topics pertaining to spiritual abuse and control, recruiting tactics, and other things associated primarily with my experiences in my former church, where I held license for a number of years. This episode is going to be a little bit different and a little bit more personal because I'm going to be sharing about my experiences with three specific individuals, two of whom I invited out, one of whom I did not but became friends with over the course of time that we were both involved in this church, saw the directions their lives took, and then my efforts to reach out to each of them over the years after I myself realized that I was being deceived and it was time for me to vamoose, get at it. I call this episode The Three Roberts because all three of these men, their first name was Robert. The first Robert was a tall, thin fellow. I met him in the late part of 1987 at the Pier 2 laundromat. We were both out there, washing clothes, in addition to me being part of the evangelistic teams that we sent out on the Navy bases every Saturday. And as we were washing clothes, I had the opportunity to strike up a conversation with him. It started off talking a little bit about music because I have a very strong interest in different types of music and the artists. That's why I enjoy doing the Radio Hill Remembered Facebook group page. I'm also a big fan of Professor of Rock and a few of these other music-related YouTube channels and podcasts. And in this conversation with Robert, I saw he wore a Cinderella concert shirt. Cinderella was a popular hair metal band from the 80s. Once the conversation reached the moment of truth where I was going to find out if he wanted to come to church Sunday morning or not, Robert very enthusiastically said, "Yes, I will." Sunday morning rolls around. He comes out. He sticks around not only for the morning service, he sticks around for the afternoon Bible study, because in between services we would have Bible studies set up for the men, primarily from the Navy base, and maybe some of the civilians who didn't have any place to go as well. Robert took to the message. He took to the preaching like a duck to water. Before the evening service was over, Robert was willing to give his life over to Jesus. He got baptized and began a walk in the ministry that was almost as long as my own. He rose up the ranks rather quickly. He made E5 within the first 2 years. He came as an E4 out of ACE. Then he made E6 his first time up. Walked off the ship with both his air and surface warfare pins. Kept his uniforms immaculate. Like myself, he was part of that outer layer, that clean front that made the church look good because we were perfectionists. We were brought up to be like that. We had to do everything right, do everything by the book. We were as reliable as all get out. Robert then applied for an officer package through the enlisted commissioning program, and he continued his naval career as a non-flying officer. You have your aviators and with the wings of gold, and then you have your NFOs, non-flying officers. They would sometimes ride with the pilots and do things like navigation. But over the course of time, Robert realized that something was wrong, and he eventually left. I tried to reach out to him after I left a couple years later. He left in 2001. The last I heard from him, he lived somewhere in Louisiana. He has ceased all communications with anybody, whether they were in the church or not. The second Robert was one I did not invite. He was a hospital corpsman stationed in the Norfolk area. He worked most of his career either at the Sinclair Fleet Base or at the Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth. Very easygoing, very friendly individual. We got along fantastic. And when we worked together on the base, reaching out to folks, he first came to the ministry in 1988. He was struggling with some health issues at the time too, and we worked with him through this because there were some senior people in the church who were still on active duty. And this Robert was able to make it all the way to where he was eligible for early retirement with full benefits. And that worked out fantastic for him. He retired early in 2001. He stuck around for about a year or so after he retired from the Navy. As time went on, he too began to see the cracks forming, the issues behind the stories about the founding pastor, the issues involving the way money was being handled. This Robert, he left the very same day I did, March 19th, 2003. He and his first wife eventually went their separate ways. Both of them have since remarried. The last I heard from this Robert, he was somewhere down in the Atlanta, Georgia area, which is where he was originally from. However, initial conversations were good, but after about the 2013-2014 time frame, we stopped talking. And the reason we quit talking, though, had nothing to do with the church, had nothing to do with the founding pastor. Unfortunately, it had everything to do with what happened down in Florida, what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, and it was mostly politics. I find that very unfortunate because I would like to think that despite whatever one's differences are about the way social justice should be handled in this country, we should never allow that to prevent us from being friends. If this second Robert I'm talking about stumbles across my podcast, I want him to know that I still pray for him. I still hope that one day we can patch up our differences and become friends again, and not let politics cloud everything. The third and final Robert was an individual I knew personally aboard one of the aircraft carriers. In fact, he worked in the same division I did. Very gung-ho, very extreme individual, very intense. Initial conversations with him, this Robert was very much into extreme sports, snowboarding, BMX, biking, skateboards, you name it, that was his thing. After a few days, he didn't take to everything immediately. It took about a week or so. But when this third Robert got involved, he was all in. He was gung-ho. You could set your clock by him. He was all in everything that the single men's ministry taught him until he wasn't. After being involved for almost 8 years, this third Robert began to experience burnout. He began to question why he was there and why he couldn't do certain things, why he couldn't do extreme sports, why he couldn't listen to certain types of music. Was it really because it was right or wrong, or was it because the church told him that he couldn't do these things and still be used of God? By the time he left, and this was around 2001, about the same time the first Robert walked away, he and I had a falling out. I tried to reach out to him quite a few times. Last I heard, he had moved back home to Durango, Colorado. He has family there. His father, I think, if I remember correctly, worked for the Coors Brewery in Golden, Colorado. But his life had been rough, especially the last year or so he was in the Navy before he got out. He had some challenges of his own that were outside of the church. But in every one of those cases, it hurts because, and I'm learning this as I'm doing my journaling on overcoming religious trauma, overcoming these ideas of being a perfectionist, overcoming wanting to fix things from the inside, being a fixer. Something my therapist initially caught on to, that my involvement with this organization, in addition to my Navy training, I was basically, it rammed home. I was a fixer and I tried to fix things. But what the therapist has told me, and I'm trying to process and internalize to change my own perspective, is that human will is an interesting thing. And even if I reach out, it's up to that other person to reach back. Maybe these three Roberts don't want to be reached out to. Maybe they don't want to be connected with anything that would reopen old wounds or open up old memories that they want to forget, because they have all, in their own way, moved on with their lives. If that be the case, then again, if any of these three men hear this podcast, I wish them all well, and I pray that God will continue to look over all of them, because we all were deceived. We all were sold a bill of goods by the same people, and we all woke up and left at different times. And when we left, we had a lot of baggage to sort out. I wish you guys well wherever you may be. This is John Cady. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit like, hit subscribe, and I will certainly catch you on the next one.